All right, let's talk about mirrorless cameras and whether or not they can have the same image quality as a DSLR. Here we have a camera here. This is a camera with the lens opening and a sensor back here. It's this sensor that has a lot to do with image quality. The kind of image quality that you're going to get has a lot to do with how well the sensor is able to capture the light that the lens projects onto it. The second important thing is the lens. At the end of the day, the quality of the image sensor and the quality of the lens are really the two key components to image quality of a device. So what they do is they take this sensor and a camera and create a box around it with a hole that attaches a lens. That's basically what a camera is. So let's take a look at mirrorless cameras. Taking that picture on its side, here's the sensor. And they build a camera body around the sensor. This is the most basic camera that you have. You have your sensor and an opening here, and to that opening you can attach a lens that has some glass in it. And what the glass essentially does is let me just take a little drawing here. What the glass does is it essentially takes the light and focuses that light onto the sensor. And in a camera like this, that's a pretty simple design. This distance doesn't have to be too long. This is the flange, the piece here that attaches the lens to the camera, and this is the sensor. So the flange to focal, this is the sensor where you focus the image on. Distance is this distance here. The new mirrorless cameras that have come out have a very short flange to focal distance because essentially all you have is a sensor, a little bit of space, and then the lens right here. So let's take a look at what happens when you create a DSLR. We have our sensor here, but instead of having the simple box, we have to expand the box a lot because with a DSLR or an SLR camera, you have to add this mirror to the box. So what you do is you create a mirror, and then there's this prism up here which kind of adds extra size, and then a viewfinder. And the way that the light works here is that the light is focused through the lens, and it goes bouncing off the mirror into this prism and out the viewfinder. And that's how you actually see the image. You're actually seeing the light being through the lens, focused into this prism and into your eye. And then what happens is that you end up with this longer flange to focal distance to allow for all this stuff in here. Now, when you actually take the image, the mirror flips up, this little mirror flips up, and the light goes straight to the sensor. And now this looks an awful lot like that smaller camera that we just saw. The light goes through the lens and hits the sensor. All of this mumbo jumbo up here is no longer has anything to do with the image. So we now have our two cameras side to side. This is the simpler camera, and this is the DSLR that has the mirror and the prism here. Now, important thing to recognize is all of this doesn't do anything to image quality whatsoever. This here simply allows you to see the image through the viewfinder. It's a different picture taking process. However, all of this adds cost and expense to the manufacturing of the camera, and it actually has something to do with the lens. If you actually take the camera design with a very short distance here, it allows you to make wider lenses, wide-angle lenses with very simple designs, because this distance being short, it's easier to get the light to cover the sensor. For cameras that have these longer flange to focal distances, you have to create kind of fancy specialized lens designs in order to get wide angles to cover. That means more glass, that means more expensive glass, that means more expensive coatings. So in order to have wide angle coverage at a high quality that's corrected for things like distortion and making sure the corner of the images are sharp and chromatic aberrations, you have to put a lot more work into creating a good wide angle lens. This is why Leica cameras, which is a 35mm piece of film here with a short flange distance, are considered to have excellent wide angle lenses even compared to modern SLR designs, which is this single lens reflex, this reflex mirror here. So that leads to a question of sensor size. Even if you have a full frame camera, which would be a camera that enjoys a large sensor that's equivalent to the size of 35 millimeter film versus an APS-C size, which is just a smaller version, there's a lot of benefits to having a really big sensor. The bigger the sensor, essentially, the easier it is to have high image quality and good high ISO, low light capability. So when you look at something like the Sony NEX system, they've chosen to use an APS-C size, which is a fairly large sensor, and it's a lot like the standard DSLRs that you get today, like the Nikon D7000 or the Canon 7D. Now, the benefits potentially of using an APS-C inside a mirrorless camera, like one of the smaller things like a Sony NEX, is that you can have high quality wide angle lens designs because of the short flange to focal distance. Whereas for a full frame DSLR, it takes an awful lot to get the same thing. For example, if you've ever seen the Canon 14 millimeter prime, it's a Canon L lens. It cost you well over $2,500. It's huge. It has this rounded lens that you can't put a protective filter on, and it costs a lot of money, and it weighs over 1.5 pounds. I believe it's about that heavy. Whereas to develop a quality 17 or 14 millimeter prime for the next system, the lens itself might be 3 or 4 inches long and require far less glass to correct the problems. So where one of the benefits of having a nice big DSLR full frame sensor is that you can have high quality wide angle lenses. That benefit is somewhat eradicated by having a short flange to focal distance in one of these mirrorless cameras. But I think one of the key things here is that in terms of image quality, the fact that you have a mirror and that you have a prism does nothing but move the flange forward. It has absolutely nothing to do with image quality. As long as you have a high quality lens and a good sensor, the image quality between these cameras is going to be comparable, and you're going to be able to compare them. The best APS-C sensors inside a mirrorless camera are not going to be any better or worse than the same one inside an SLR, with the one difference being you eliminate some of the problems with having the flange and focal distance so long. So hopefully that does a little bit to make everybody on the internet angry, or to help you understand why mirrorless cameras can equal or surpass the quality of DSLRs at this point. Hope you had fun. Take care now. Bye.